Morning. Thank you for coming to the book launch. I introduce myself. My name is Imran, the publisher, and also friend of Guat. So let's keep today informal, relax. It's meant to be a celebration of Guat's lifetime achievement, if I can call it as such. Maybe I give a bit of background. I'm from the Center for Interfaith Understanding. It's a new outfit that just started this year. Because we want to go a little bit deeper into interfaith conversations and explore some of the issues that are affecting interreligious relations. So we focus on a few things. Firstly, we curate programs, interfaith dialogues and all that. We are also doing a bit of research work and also publishing. So I'm happy that this is the first publication under Center for Interfaith Understanding, CIFU. And we hope that it's a small little contribution to the interfaith discourse here in Singapore. Now, I know Guat for some time, I don't know how long, Guat. We've both been involved in the interfaith scene, and I'm glad that there are many others who have done longer work in the interfaith scene in Singapore. I'd like to acknowledge Mr. Zainuddin, for example. Mr. Zainuddin, the longest serving IRO member, yeah? Yes, from the interreligious organization, one of the longest. Yeah. And then we also have a few others who have been involved in interfaith work. Hichu, wife of the late Reverend Yap, and Reverend Yap is one of the pioneers of interfaith dialogue with the IRO. So thank you for coming. Come in. Thank you, Shirin. Come, have a seat. And also we have friends also from overseas also. Yeah, we have Lily from Myanmar. So Guat asked her to come to Singapore for the launch because they were friends at Hartford Seminary. Yeah, so Lily is with Yangon Theological Seminary. Yeah, we also have another friend, Yenny from Indonesia. So where are you based, Yenny?
At the moment, I'm in Jakarta with Nufik Neso.
With?
Nufik Neso.
Okay, what's that? Sorry.
It's a scholarship program.
Okay. Thank you. And we have Abraham Silo, who's with Jakarta Theological Seminary. And I'd like to acknowledge also Dr. Ernest Chu, our Singapore historian. Just 2 months ago, we organized a bicentennial dialogue on 200 years of Christian-Muslim relations. And he had a good conversation with Professor Syed Farid Alatas on this topic. And thank you everyone else for coming.
Dr. Lai Aing.
Of course, Dr. Lai Aing. She's one of the scholars who actually do work on religions in Singapore. She formerly from Institute of Policy Studies and also from Asia Research Institute. Now she's busy taking photographs and videos of authors. And she's now heading a new initiative called Labor of Love, where she tries to bring the message of peace, justice through music and poetry and other ways. Yeah. Okay, so now when I first approached Guat actually, this book is based on her thesis that she did for her master's thesis, which she did at Hartford Seminary. It's quite dated in the sense that she graduated in 2008.
So now you know how old I am.
No, when she did her master's, she's already old.
Now she's young.
Now she's young. Come in. Yeah. So, the data inside is up to 2007, 2008. So it's not really up to date in that sense. I've been persuading her to publish her thesis for many years, but she has refused thus far because she has some other things to look into. And then recently we reconnected again, and then I convinced her again. She has to go to Jerusalem to meditate over it. She came back and she said, yes, okay. Now the reason why I think it's a very important book because it provides a snapshot of the historical relationship between the two religions that has been affected by a lot of historical baggages. So in order to understand Christian-Muslim relations today, we need to understand what has transpired in history, and I think she has captured that quite well in the first few chapters in her book. That's one reason. Second reason, she said, well, it's quite dated and all that, but I think it's an important contribution to capture those what had transpired, especially after 9/11, the first few years after 9/11, to put it on record. Of course, things have evolved. Things have changed for better. I think it has evolved towards a better outcome. But nonetheless, we need to understand what has transpired in order to understand where we are right now. So that's another important element that I thought needs to be put for posterity, so that future researchers can take on from where she had left in terms of research. Thirdly, also, I think the book has a bit of critical angle to what could have transpired but did not. But again, that's an element of history, where we learn from history and we see where are the gaps, and therefore we try to do it better. So that's part of the contribution of the book, I hope. And last but not least, it's an opportunity for her to reconnect with all her old friends. So a lot of you are friends with her. Yeah, so that, okay, I don't want to say about the age thing. Anyway, thank you so much, Guat, for this wonderful opportunity for us to publish your book. So right now I'm going to invite someone to recite a poem. Lily, can come to the front, please? Come, Lily. So Lily will recite a poem that Guat wrote, and it's part of the book as part of her journey towards scholarship. Lily.
To be a scholar is an onerous task, but one which we must take to heart, to open our mind to things anew and see with the eyes of our heart. To not judge from a superior stance, to be humble at heart. To not give sway to your selfish intentions, but honor others with respect. We examine with critical eyes and forget the beauty is in the eye of the beholder. We compare and judge in righteousness, lose our humanity, and turn deaf ears to cries in the name of reason. To you who bear the responsibility, lift your eyes to truly see, not through glaze or tempered glass, but with compassion, care, and love. Others are what they be, not we can change but see. Only when we delight in them, then our hearts will not condemn. So commit yourself to true scholarship, my friends, of heart, mind, and spirit. In it, you will find the light to paths to be discovered. Written by Guat Kwee See.
Thank you. I'm not sure whether she's still on the path of scholarship. I hope she will have a second book after this, right, Guat? I mean, you retired, you have plenty of time to write.
Assumptions.
No, she's going on a world book tour after this. Okay, I'm going to invite another person to say a few words about the relationship the person has with Guat in terms of the journey of doing interfaith work and all that, and also to say a few comments about the book also. So first, I would like to invite Pastor Gabriel Liu from the Kampung Kapung Methodist Church to say a few words. Gabriel?
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Imran. Congratulations, Guat. This is the day we look forward to. We are really indebted in our church for the ministry of Guat, because in our earlier days, she came and taught the Kampung Kapung Methodist Church how to do interfaith ministry, because it's kind of very new to us. So she'll pace us, she'll follow us to the Guat Kwee See temple, to learn about Buddhism. And then she also facilitated discussion groups between our members to help them see the value of dialogue. And I can show you the works of her labor, a labor of love. And partly because of her teaching, we are able to invite people of different faiths to our church every year. So I have distributed my church magazine to you. You look at the front cover, you will see that every year during our hymn festival, people of different religion will come to our church, which is very unique actually. You'll see Imran there, and also Dean in his Taoist attire, and people of the Hindu faith and Buddhist faith and Sikhism as well. And then they sit through the whole service. And then after that, we'll go to Mustafa for halal lunch. Yeah. And then if you look further in page 22 and 23 and 24, you will see that our church is recognized for our interfaith ministry, given a token of appreciation by Deputy Minister Heng Swee Kiat. And then I wrote about Hymn Festival and the photo. And then if you turn to page 24, you'll see that we have a IRO anniversary celebration. And then the motif was there with our church group. So we thank God for people like Guat who are peacemakers. Jesus says, "Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called children of God." And all of you are peacemakers also. I also, of course, collect cuttings of my members, through the years. Whenever they appeared in the newspaper, I would cut it out, whether good or bad. But I'm happy to tell you that God appears in the newspaper in a good way. Yeah. And just 8 years ago, she was featured, as a person who have contributed to interfaith relations and cultivating respect and understanding between the religions. Now, this doesn't come at an easy way because, the atmosphere and the climax, it is not quite conducive. Sometimes when you become a peacemaker, one side may think that you are a spy, the other side will think that you are the traitor. So you have to be very strong and you have to be called by God. And you continue to love people even though they may say bad things about you. In this newspaper article, she sold her posh condo in Holland Road in order to fund her master's studies in Islam and the Christian-Muslims relationship at Harvard Seminary in Connecticut, United States. Now, Harvard Seminary is the seminary that the first pastor of Kampung Kapor Methodist Church, William Shellabell, went to teach after his missionary work in Singapore. So we are quite connected, and I understand there are graduates from Harvard Seminary here also. And then she said, when I told people I'm studying Islam, they will ask, "So are you a Muslim?" Say the Christian who is single. I said, "No, I'm learning to study and appreciate Islam." And they could not understand that and would ask if I was betraying my faith. She said that learning about Islam with classmates of other religion has made her a more mature Christian. After all, she has to understand her own faith well in order to explain it to others. And after returning to Singapore in 2000, she became a facilitator at the Harmony Center at the mosque at Moise. And then she facilitated conversation circle, small groups, about 8 people of different faiths, to talk about religion and reflect on events such as racial riots that took place in the past. So even as we witness what is happening in the Middle East right now, we are really saddened by people who exploit religion to advance war and divisions. In such a setting, I'm so glad that we have this session today as peacemakers to come and not let the extremists hijack the narrative, but we will set the agenda for peace, respect, and harmony in the world. So thank you everybody, and thank you, Guat.
Of course, Kampong Kapor Methodist Church is also a very special church because it's the only church with an interfaith ministry. Am I right?
There are other churches doing different things and different ways, but I would say that we set the example for good practices.
Okay, so it's the best practice for other churches in Singapore. Yeah, it's also thanks to the late Reverend Yap who also helped pave the way for that.
That's
and
right.
also Reverend Kang Ho Soon also.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
And so Guat is also standing on the shoulders of giants. Yeah. Thank you, Guat, for your labor of love at Kampong Kapor Methodist Church. Now, as mentioned, as Gabriel has mentioned, Guat was also pivotal in setting a program called Developing Conversation Circles, or DCC, which became a flagship program of the Harmony Center, an interfaith institution under the Islamic Religious Council of Singapore, or MUIS. So when MUIS was first initiated this whole Harmony Center, which is based at An-Nahda Mosque in Bishan, Guat came on board to help develop a flagship program in 2007. So, and from then on also MUIS forged a partnership, MOU with Hartford Seminary for their Building Abrahamic Partnership program. So every year MUIS will send Muslims to study at the seminary as part of the Abrahamic program. And that's how also some of them connected with Guat. And now I want to introduce another person who has been to Hartford Seminary and also a close friend of Guat, and he's also with the Islamic Religious Council of Singapore, MUIS, or should I say Sharia Court rather? You want me to give you a full designation, I can, but you, PDAP? I can mention?
No, it's okay.
Yeah, it's okay. Because it's your personal capacity. Yeah. Before I invite Alfian Kuchit to say a few words, I also want to acknowledge Zalman, who's also a director in MUIS. He was my former boss. Oh. So he was very pivotal also in terms of the forging of the MOU with Hartford Seminary. In fact, he studied in Hartford Seminary also. And he has a thesis, master's thesis also. I've been pursuing him to publish that also. That would be a good compliment to Guat, but 10 years more after he retired. Thank you, Zalman, for being here with Mashita, his better half. Okay, Alfian, come, let's round of applause for Alfian.
Good morning, everyone. Hi, and how are you? So in 2006, my daughter was born, and that was my first time being a father. And being in the labor ward and seeing how a baby is born is one of the most miraculous things I've ever witnessed as a person. But there's actually another miracle that happened on that day. That day was the last day of Ramadan, and so everyone at home was actually very busy with the preparation for Hari Raya. So I was there alone in the hospital, but lo and behold, there was someone who gave me comfort, gave me strength, and that was none other than Guat, who was practically the first visitor to come and say congratulations for the birth of my daughter. And so Guat has been with my family throughout the ages. My daughter has recently turned 13 and she's in secondary school. 13? 13. Secondary school. And so when so my daughter was like that. And so Guat has followed through her footsteps. She's been in our family. And when Huda, my daughter, was interested in literary arts, the first thing that Guat did was to give her a book of poems. And that's something that I hope that my daughter will take away in terms of the model of friendship, fellowship, that we can be of different race and different religions, but we can be together in harmony and in love. And I think that's one thing I want my daughter to take away. Anyone who is going to read, and I highly recommend, because when Guat finished her thesis, she gave me a copy, and I went through it. And it's an interesting study of the historical development in terms of missionary work in Singapore, especially after the coming of Raffles. We know with the bicentennial celebrations, it's also a good opportunity, in fact, for us to rediscover our history. And so if you were to read the writings of the missionaries, whether it's Zwemmer, you'd find typical of those kind of movements during those times in the 19th and 20th century of writings about Muslims in Southeast Asia, in Malay Southeast Asia. And you find somewhat reductionist images of the Muslims being indolent and lazy, basically fatalistic because it's what the religion taught them to do so. But it's also interesting because if you read some of these narratives written by these Christian missionaries, you do see a sense of agency. Because there was one story of Christian missionaries going to a Malay kampung and giving out tracts. And as they turn around, someone said, "Tengok api," which means see the bonfire, because basically all of them just threw the tracts away and lit the fire in it. So these are the kinds of narratives and histories that are interesting because it gives us a sense as to what actually happened in Singapore with the coming of the British, especially in terms of how Christian missionaries tried to gain a foothold, in terms of their missionary work towards the Muslims, and why they were actually not successful. And my sense is that if you read the book, is this idea that nary an empathy or a sense of friendship, and if they were to just go across and contemporaneous to that situation in the 19th, 20th century, Duncan MacDonald was in Turkey, and he was the one who set up the Center for Christian Muslim Understanding at Hartford Seminary. And Christian missionaries at Hartford doing missionary work in the 20th century, early 20th century, they were overcome by World War I and the catastrophe that it brought about. It changed their perspective. Rather than thinking of going to Turkey to convert souls, they wanted to understand the Muslims better. They wanted to extend the friendship, that sense of knowing each other. And that's why Hartford Seminary has continued to have that tradition of not going to a Muslim country purely for the sake of getting souls, but purely for the sake of friendship. And I think that's my takeaway from the Hartford Seminary experience I gained, and thanks to also my former boss, Salman, who sent me there for 3 months. And also a time where I was able to meet Guat as a person and as a friend, as a fellow student. So, seeing as to how her theology developed, my call to my fellow Muslim friends is also similar, takes a similar track. That we have to think about this theology of multiculturalism, the idea of how do we include the other in our theology. So the Quran talks about a phrase, and this is often cited, وَرَضِيتُ لَكُمُ الْإِسْلَامَ دِينًا, and God only accepts Islam as a religion. Is there a space for us to rethink how we should interpret this verse? Because this verse, in its current dominant interpretation, came out during the Middle Ages, during the time of conflict between the Western Imperial Church and the Imperial Caliphates. And so the interpretation will have been colored by that sense of conflict. I hope that we can also give space to modern theologians, people like Jamal Banna, people like Pak Munir Mulhan of Indonesia, who's talking about the idea of how do you incorporate the other. And one of the verses that's very interesting in terms of how Pak Munir Mulhan of Indonesia has looked at is this idea of what is, this great victory that God talks about in Surah Al-Ahzab. God says, Ya ayyuhallazina amanu taqullaha wa qulu qawlan sadida. O ye who believe, be conscious of God and say words of justice. Yuslih lakum a'malakum wa yaghfir lakum dhunubakum wa may yuti'illaha wa rasulahu faqad faza fawzan 'azima. And this is the verse where God promises the believers who are conscious of God and who speaks up for the truth that God will forgive sins, and that whoever obeys God and His messenger will attain a great victory. And in this sense, Pak Munir Mohan talks about this idea of inclusivity, rather than just limiting the phrase to only Muslims in the capital M. People who believe and people who do good works, people who speak up for justice, similarly are able to attain that sense of great victory from God. And so I hope that as we move forward, leaving behind the past, but we should also look for the past in terms of understanding the lessons for the future. And so that future holds for us is that when we think about who do we worship God and not the interpretations of human beings. And in our search for the divine will, we have to ask and constantly question ourselves, what is it that God wants to do? and I think God has shown us the way. Thank you so much.
To be frank, this is the first time I heard Alfian speak in a sermon like. I think we should invite Alfian to give a full-blown lecture on theology of religions according to the Muslim tradition. Thank you, Alfian. Yeah, so this is not the bonfire that he was alluding to. Guat will explain later why she has this very unique centerpiece. I also want to acknowledge what Alfian had said about understanding history, and in the lecture that Dr. Ernest Chu gave in September, he also quoted from Kierkegaard, the Danish theologian and also philosopher, who said that life can only be understood backward, but can only be lived forward. Yeah, so I think that is also the spirit of the launch of this book, in order for us to have greater insight into the past, in order to build our future together. But that also does not mean that just because the book focuses on Christian and Muslims, then this is the sole work that needs to be done. In Singapore, I also want to acknowledge the interreligious work that has been done with other faith communities also. It just so happened that Guat's focus is on Christian Muslim, but we also acknowledge people of other faiths also who have also contributed to the interfaith scene in Singapore, including the non-religious too. So that's the unique part about Singapore. People of having faith, different faiths, and then people with no faith also coming together in order to make this space a better place. Guat has also requested Dr. Lai Ah-Eng to say a few words, if you can. Please, Dr. Ah-Eng. Yeah. Ah-Eng and Guat, yeah, they are sisters in love.
No, I've been going around adopting people because I come from a small family. I've adopted 4 girls on top of my 1 girl, so I've got 4 goddaughters. And I was recently, before this event, thinking of asking Guat whether she could be my adopted sister, you know. Anyway, thank you for this opportunity. Thank you, Guat and Imran. I first met Guat when I was still working as a research fellow at the Institute of Policy Studies some years back. And at that time, we were just beginning to look at intercultural and interreligious issues in a serious way. Of course, there are people who always looked at it seriously, but what I mean is really documenting it, researching it. And it took me a long time to get that job in the first place because some people wouldn't hire me, even though they knew I was brave. But I was hired to do the intercultural, interracial, then we moved on to the interreligious. And so for the first time, IPS launched an intercultural dialogue series. Some of you will remember that. I think that was about 10 years ago. And we actually invited both individuals and organizations and representatives from different organizations, including the religious organizations, to come. And I must say I was so scared, right? Because this is like doing something new. I must say I'm not a very religious person. Although maybe I'm a very spiritual person. I used to wonder why I live in a slum and why I got it all mixed up when I was very young. How come Father Christmas goes and gives out presents, but it's only to those Christians, and we fellas here, and the slum dwellers, don't get presents? And I was so hurt. You know, those kinds of little childhood growing up experiences. But anyway, I worked my way in the most circuitous way around the religious and the interreligious. But growing up in a very multicultural place, I think it shaped me in very, very fundamental ways to look out always for the multi and the inter. Okay? So anyway, to cut the story short, I invited Guat to come for the intercultural dialogues. And I must say, that actually opened the doors to some extent, okay, to new ways of looking at very difficult issues. I think we must not be afraid to look at difficult issues while we also learn to appreciate how far we have come and to appreciate the beauty of the inter.
I would refer to that. And Guat was very important in in that project because she dared to, maybe we hold hands there, we dared to walk a little bit further and stretch and push the boundaries to say, okay, we're going to do this together. Okay, and so I have Guat to thank for. In fact, her chapter is in this book that caused me real mental blocks. Some of you have seen the book, Religious Diversity in Singapore. I must say there are huge gaps there. I wish I could do another book, but I don't have the energy. So maybe it's people like Imran and Guat and new people who add on and do a volume 2. But for volume 1, Guat's piece is a very important one because it came from, I would say, the non-academic, okay, the established academics, some of them are there, but we wanted to push the boundaries and get other people who also participate and work on interfaith to have their piece, the thoughts, their experiences documented and in a book that cuts across different backgrounds. So thank you again, Guat. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you. I think as mentioned earlier, Guat's book also captures the first few years after September 11. So that was quite a pivotal moment in Singapore. And I think the government also realized that that is a pivotal moment. And the establishment of the at that time it's interracial confidence circle. Now it's interracial and religious confidence circle. And that has been a model to forge social cohesion at the grassroots level. And I saw Fazlur there, who's also the chairman of one of the IRCC. Kembangan, Chaichi? Yeah, thank you for coming, Fazlur. Okay, now, we don't want to waste too much time. We want to know why Guat actually decided to publish this book. What happened in Jerusalem that made her receive the revelation to agree to publish the book? So we were scrambling, and she said yes, and then quickly we were trying to put it together within just a few months, yeah, Guat, 2-3 months, yeah, and that's the book that we have. But interestingly also, we managed to get very good endorsements from a few established academics. So if you see at the back, of course, we have Professor Heidi Hetzel, who's the President Emeritus of Hartford Seminary. So she was the president when Guat was studying there. We just met the new president, Joel Loh.
Professor Joel.
Yeah, who was in town just 2 weeks ago. We also have, of course, Professor Said Farid Alatas, who couldn't make it today. He has another engagement, but thank you, Imad, for representing your father here. Okay, I'm not trying to put you to live in the shadows of your father, no. But I think you are on track to be a good scholar also, and that's where you can pick up what Aing has said. You can do that research later. Okay, also there are a few endorsements in the book, and can mention that we wrote in actually, and Guat has sent the thesis, and they gave some few words, and that includes Professor Ataullah Siddiqui, who's well known for his work on Christian-Muslim relations. He's based in the UK at Markfield Institute of Higher Education. There's also Professor Fatima Hussein from Indonesia. In fact, this book mirrors a bit like her work, which is on Christian-Muslim relations in the New Order of Indonesia during the Suharto period. There's also Professor Paul Hedges. Currently, I think he's the foremost expert on interfaith dialogue here in Singapore. He's based at the Studies in Interreligious Relations in Plural Societies program at RSIS NTU. There's also, of course, Dr. Lai Aing also gave a very good endorsement. Thank you, Aing. And also, Reverend Dr. Marcus Baybrook, who is the president, actually is a founder also, of the World Congress of Faiths, which is one of the oldest interfaith organization. In fact, it's older than IRO, but it's no longer functioning. So IRO gets the credit of still functioning oldest interfaith organization in the world. Yeah, so thank you for those. Matthew, also thank you for helping with the production, and Dean also my colleague there. So now I want to invite Guat to the front. So big round of applause for Guat. Okay, Guat, now's your time to say something. So I don't have to prompt her; she will go on and on. So maybe just to start, tell us about the context of you doing your thesis back then.
Okay. But I just want to say something. Okay. Today, my life from childhood till I'm 61, everybody who has been involved is here. Right? It's like my whole life is flashed across. My primary school schoolmates, my schoolmates from different places, in the university, all the adventures that we went through, from the Methodist Church to the Catholic Church to Hartford Seminary to my energy healing practice. My friend is here, and family, friends, and everyone. It's like my whole life is flashed, and I call this. Somebody said it was my come out. Okay, so. Because I never came out, you know. I was always struggling to fly like a butterfly, but I just couldn't find out who I was. And so you are going to see this is me, all right. And some of you may find that I didn't know she was like that. Well, I didn't know either. But because I was being led on a journey, all right. And so in this being led to the journey, you are exposed to different things, and different environments and different spaces and places. I would like to acknowledge that I received the Lord Jesus Christ as my Savior, okay, Lord and Savior, together in the year of 1991 with my friend Jane, my classmate, all right? And she was pivotal in helping me, you know, to seek, and also my other two schoolmate friends, Maurice and Elaine, who are like my childhood friends, who actually brought me to Barker Road Methodist Church, where I received Jesus. Okay, so these are, for me, are important milestones that brought me on this journey. So second thing is, you would see a centerpiece. All right, and this centerpiece is what we do at Women's Leadership Institute in the Hartford Seminary. Because we think that dialogues are conversations and about stories. And for me, these are memories that we hold in our hearts. The centerpiece is something, there's a bit of us somewhere if you look at it. And I've left some marbles at the bottom. So if you would like to, before you leave, please take a marble. The marble is a little bit of ourselves that's there. Childhood, dream, hopes, when we were children, when life was so simple that we didn't know there was a them and us, and everybody was together as one family. All right, so please do take it. Take one bag, because I'm not sure whether I have enough, but I just brought the whole bag here.
Just
right?
the marble, what?
Huh?
I saw some things I want to take.
No. Oh, okay. Oh, bring the marble. Bring the marble. Okay, so because the rest are bits of history and parts of me and parts of other people as well, and I really want to thank them for bringing bits of it here and there, and I could put it together. The second thing is, you see, I didn't realize what the thesis meant to me, and that's why I couldn't articulate it into a book. All right, and it took me quite a while. So when I did the thesis, I finished it in like 2007, 2008, and now it's 2019. And it comes from the fact that I went to a pilgrimage, a Christian-Muslim pilgrimage, and I went to 3 countries: Istanbul, Egypt, Cairo, Damietta, and I went to the Holy Land. All right, and it was a group of Christians and Muslims. So in that space, this was my 3rd time there. All right, the first time I went with Jane, and the first time we only went to all the Christian places, and I never looked at the Palestinian. It was all about my faith and me and the churches. And I never met a Palestinian. The second time I went, I stayed for 10 weeks. And that was when I went into West Bank and Gaza Strip, and I spent 10 weeks in the Holy Land. And one of my fellow travelers that went part of the journey with me is Mike Liu. And I have a friend, Grace, and her husband, and a pastor who has passed away. And of course, I'm saddened that Jessica, who was also with me, has left us. All right? But in that experience, we had both a Jewish and a Muslim guide, and that was what changed my world, because it was as if I went one side to the Christian side, you know, and the Jewish quarters, and then I went to the Muslim quarters and the Muslim side, and there were 2 sides of a world that really challenged my idea of what this beautiful city is and why I started my interfaith journey in 2001. My lives are colliding because my very first Muslim friend is Zainuddin over there with the beard, the longest serving IRO member, and his wife Zaitun, and I'm so glad that she has come. And I was their, what do you call it? I was their strawberry. Every time they were talking, I would come. I'm the in-between one, you know? And then I was like helping line with the bridesmaids and stuff like that. And so that was beginning for me to move into the Muslim community. Because if you see somewhere in the front, I actually brought a team of Jews, Christians, and Muslims from the Holy Land back to Singapore. Because I felt that Singapore and Israel were very the same. Large Muslim population outside the country, and a small Muslim population inside. And how come we can have peace, and how come others are still living in conflict and trauma? And so we actually brought a team to come and for a week to visit Singapore, and that was when I met the interreligious organization, made friends with them, and visited all the people and met all the officials, you know, were involved in interreligious work. Because actually I come from a very evangelistic background, and it was I'm involved in the 82,000 movement and stuff like that. But I think the one thing that really touched me was I went to the Tian Hock King Temple, and I met Master Lee from the Taoist Federation. And just before I left, he just made a remark. He said it in Mandarin. He said, "You don't understand how you hurt us when you evangelize to our children who are Taoist." And I have to say, I have evangelized to Taoists. We have organized children's programs in our family service centers, and we have done evangelistic outreach. And they have received Jesus. They have taken the Bible at home, and the Taoists have taken them to return, or some of them they have burned. And we never really thought about what were we doing to them. We really loved them. They were children, primary school. And I think Master Lee is pivotal. He's not here, but he's actually pivotal. He just turned my whole world upside down, just as Israel turned my whole world upside down, you know. And I thought, okay, I don't understand. So I feel that I'm being drawn to different communities. What is it like to stand in the shoes of the other, to feel the pain? And sometimes when I realized that in Israel it was, you show a hand of friendship, but they recoil from you because they think you are seeking to do violence because of the history. Okay? So now history becomes a very important thing for me. Why? Because so this becomes my inner journey. So there's always an outer journey and an inner journey. My inner journey is the fact that I'm adopted. I'm adopted into a beautiful family, and we live 3 generations in our beautiful home with a garden. But my mom, my aunties, there were 2 families, my mom and my auntie's family, and my grandma, so 3 generations. They never told us about the war. We never knew anything about Singapore history at all. Nothing about the violence. All she did was she kept me, and I was very angry with her, caged at home. Meaning, not caged in the cage that we wear, but caged in the sense that you don't go and mix people, don't talk to strangers, after school you must come back, you must study very hard, okay? We must get our career. That was the part. And some of you who know my family, they know that I met my mom and stuff like that. So it was like, I was like a little bird in a cage. And I didn't realize why the elders quarreled at night, and they were shouting. There was family quarrels, and that's why they moved away. They used to stay all the generation, 5 families stayed in one house in Emerald Hill Road, and then we split and we moved, of course, with HDB and everything. But the legacy of this conflict moved, but nobody would tell me anything. I never see my grandfather, until I only see him when my mom goes and picks him up from my uncle's place on Sundays, and he would just come and have lunch with us. And my grandma would spit on him. And look at him like, "Sui lah," you know? And all this is histories. My auntie would say, "Swap, swap, swap." Swap means, let go, cover up, no need to speak, no speak anymore. And then in the night, you know, my cousin would be angry with the father, there'll be things happening, and I was in a beautiful home. But it was a conflicted place, and nothing was spoken. In fact, some parts of my family never even meet, you know. And so the thing I learned about my late cousin, Dr. Goh, whom I actually took care of, was what she did with my other cousins was she decided to build the bridge. Okay, we can't talk about the past, but she would always host us for meals, for Chinese New Year. She would invite everybody. You know, after all those uncles and aunties died, then the lower half can talk. When the uncles and aunties come, you're like, you cannot talk, you know. So, and she would just gather us and she would feed us, she would give us all the resources, everything, you know, give us the hospitality. And I think that was what I learned from her, was that, okay, we cannot talk. We meet, we gather for food once a year, Christmas, birthday, and that was what she did. She gave herself to us. But there was all this history that was lost because they were all dying. And now my cousin has already died. I have two cousins and both of them died, and I'm probably one of the oldest person in my family now. I mean, there are others, but you know. And so, this is like our Christian-Muslim relations. We don't talk about it. We don't know what happened. We just know the imagery. Then somebody throws a gossip, put some Facebook news, and then we, that's what they did. But you really didn't know what happened. Really, you know. And it was very strange because I like when I go back to my, you know, I would only go to visit my uncle's place once a year during Chinese New Year and see my eldest uncle and auntie. And we were treated like almost like the poor people. And I didn't know why. I don't understand, you know. And the same thing. So my book it doesn't have all the parts, all right? It's a perspective from my own perspective, because when we look at any story, it's got to connect with us. And how does it connect with us is how we will tell the story. So you may say, oh, this part not correct, fine. But what I used for this book, when I did the course at Developing Conversation Circles at Harmony Center, we would talk about it in the circle. We would create a safe space, we would take a chapter like the Nadra riots, we would read it, and then I would have Joe Consencio, and different people who had different experience. And they'll say, and Zainui would tell me, no, this is not what happened. My mom saved the Eurasian and disguised them as Muslims wearing the hijab. That's what he said. And of course we're going like, yeah, the Christians are fighting the Muslims, you know, like, eh? And then you have all these little stories that come out. And that's what I hope. That this is not a complete story, because it is a story from a place where I'm taking scholars' work and I'm looking at it. I have some interviews, but I don't cover everyone. But when you take a chapter and you look at it and you have a table conversation like that, everyone will have a different story. Joe would tell you, you know, the Malay young man saved me as I was coming home. He's a teacher, you know, coming home from school, he was saved, and then they told him, uncle, go away, to run away. So there will always be little gems in there. People who inspire us, like Reverend Yap Kim Hao, his stance, you know, his work with Christian Conference of Asia, his work together with Sister Teresa and IRO, doing conferences where we actually talk about these issues, very deep issues, all right? Of course, not everybody would come, but I think that it's important to put on record that it happened, because a lot of us will say, some of them will say, the Muslims, they never appear for the dialogue, you know? Then the other one will say, yeah, the Christians also never appear. So I want to show you that some of them did appear. Some of them are not with us, but they left a legacy, and I want that legacy to be known. All right, it's not a full legacy. We're still on the way. There are some things we still, as like in my family, we still cannot talk about. But that's okay. That's us. It's part of the journey. All right. And I wanted to read you something that really, you see, when I went on When I went on this journey with the Jamiata, it was organized by the Franciscans. I went with Friar John Wong and Aaron Maniam from the Explorations in Faith program.
Zubi.
And Zubi is there. Zubi and I and Angela took the camel up Mount Sinai, which was quite horrendous. 3 women like screaming away, like, where are you? I'm so dark, I can't see anything. Oh my gosh! And my back is hitting me. And suddenly, when we all ended up at the top, where's Angela? And then she turned out to be a Japanese lady. Oh my gosh, we lost one. Where did they go? Then 5 or 10 minutes later, then Angela trotted up in her camel. But it was really horrendous. But I think the most touching moment, was when we went at Damiata, and Friar John Wong never told us what was going to happen that day. We read the Al-Fatiha, which is the first chapter of the Quran. And we said the Lord's Prayer. And then he talked to us about Jesus in the upper room with his disciples. And the need for peace. And we washed each other's feet in that upper room, Muslim and Christians. Our guide, Muhammad G, cried. The security guards that were guarding us, I think they were all very, very touched, and so were we. We forget in what we want to do, in what we want to achieve, we forget that I think we forget that Jesus and Prophet Muhammad were also people with big hearts. And if you would read, the first verse that Zainuddin would always quote to me was that we are all people of the book. And he would remind me that we were meant to created just to know each other. I'm misrepresenting the Quran, but I can't find the verse. But it's somewhere in the book, okay? So, page 3, and I'm going to read it for you now.
See, as the editor, I know which page.
Okay. Can you find it and you read it? Please read it. Can you read it? Okay. Sorry, I told him the text was too small. I said a woman of 61 cannot read such small text. Okay. So Zainuddin, the first thing he always tells me is, the Quran says in 49 verse 13, "O man, we created you from a single pair of a male and female and made you into nations and tribes so that you get to know one another." And I will always remember Jesus, who told us the greatest commandment: you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your mind. And he also reminded us, you shall love your neighbor as yourself. All this hang all the law and the prophets. And so I hold these two very closely because I believe in the best of everyone, and I believe in the best of whatever the scripture gives us. There will be texts always of anger and disappointment and competition and rivalry. Well, that's human nature. But we are on our own journey. And we can be the best Christian and the best Muslim. And the best Christian and the best Muslims, compassion and mercy, Christians full of love, each have their own particular characteristics. So now let's go back to Jerusalem. I'm sitting in Dormant on the Mount of Olives, and I'm looking across at the Dome. We've just passed, we live in Bethlehem, and I've just seen the wall. The wall, Apartheid Wall it's called, by the Palestinians. It's a security wall for the Jews, but it's a wall, and it's a long wall. And my friend says, yeah, but they never kept out those people from when they built the Great Wall of China. But you could see that when there's a physical wall, actually there is an invisible wall. And the invisible wall is in our mind. And that wall is manifested in the physical. We have to be separate. We're not safe. We don't trust you. We think you're going to attack us. And that's what we do in our own normal spaces. If we don't know people, yeah, okay, we'll keep them apart and not. And what I realized was I would like to throw my stone, this is my stone, into the water and ruffle some water. And I hope that people would think, as they read this book, Okay, besides criticizing lah, font is too small, whatever, the book is too heavy. Why she like that? Why why show the Marina Bay Sands? You know, not religious. Oh, but it is a religion to other people. Okay, so okay. Besides that, I hope that you would find something within that, because this was how I felt I was being led by the divine to speak. And when I read it after 10 years or something, I almost dropped myself. Huh? These words came out of my mouth. Oh my gosh, who's writing this book? All right. And I think the thing that really struck me, and this is, I have to add that I wrote something else, but Imran directed me to this poet, Nizar Kabani, who died in 1998. And I felt it would have been what Jesus said. Oh Jerusalem, the city of sorrow, a big tear wandering in the eye. Who will halt the aggression? On you, the pearl of religions. Who will wash your bloody walls? Who will safeguard the Quran? The Bible, sorry. Who will safeguard the Bible? Who will rescue the Quran? Who will save Christ from those who have killed Christ? Who will save man? When I sat at the wall looking at the Dome of the Rock, I just felt like crying. Because everywhere now is full of violence and conflict. And we also have a climate issue. And I think that the religions, not only Christians and Muslims, but all the other religions, don't see beyond outside the wall that they built around themselves. We are going to be in difficult times. Sometimes people might say, yeah, we're waiting for the Messiah to come, we're waiting for the Mahdi to come. But in the terms of Christianity, Jesus is within us. So when you call out to Jesus, sometimes call out to your own Jesus. How can you be more like Jesus in the environment? And what would Jesus actually do? He would reach out to all those who are marginalized, all those who are oppressed. And he would show them the love of God, because he is love. And so this is my lesson, was whatever is, I forgive. I let go and move on, because it's more important that we really look to our community than anything else. But this is my message for myself, as always. And so I hope that when you take this book, that you will find some laughter and joy in it. There's some funny moments, all right. And actually, the funny moment was the point when Alfian talked about the fact that they burned the Christian pamphlet. I'm sorry, but it is, because you never stand in another person's shoes. You don't know, you give them a present, you think that they love it. But you never ask them, do you want this present? Or maybe just sit around and tell some stories. Stories always work with Jesus. And I think Prophet Muhammad told a lot of stories too. So maybe we need to just sit around, gather around in the fireplace, and maybe tell our stories. And I think when you are touched, when you share your story about how you have been touched by people, you will have the essence and understanding that you have been touched by God. Because God sends people to touch us, to comfort us, to encourage us. And I really want to thank those of you, you know who you are, who have been with me over these 7 years in my most difficult times, as I've been looking after my elderly cousins, looking after my own health. And God has sent Muslims, Christians, Buddhists, non-religious people, all kinds of people to just be with me, to help me, to uplift me, buy me lunch, like Bhavani. Off and on, she'll come to NUH and buy lunch. And the beautiful part is Zainuddin will go to my cousin. My cousin had kidney failure. Once he brought her rose in a bottle, plastic bottle. And then every time she asked me, I want the rose. Okay, so I buy the rose. And the rose was Guat Kwee See, you know. $10 over. I was like, what, that's expensive rose, you know? And then he would go and sit with my cousin and sing her songs like, Rose, Rose, I love you, with an aching heart. And she would remember him. She don't remember. She's having problems with her mind because of the chemical imbalance. So she don't know who we are. Sometimes she They say, that one, the Zainuddin, that one, where is he, Alright? So I think that there are people who always show love. And when they show love, we know that the Spirit is with them. We know that they are sharing this love for us. I don't distinguish, actually. I just see people, and by your fruits you'll be seen. You know, and for me is, I share this with love for you. And I hope that you will be, just open your heart and receive it. And that's what the sacred space is about, creating a space for conversations, for thoughts, for sharing of stories. And if you look at it, parts of our history are there, parts of the elements of the life. And I really want to mention also that in this Hartford Seminary manuscript, there's also a part where they talk about, William Belchfield talked about it. He said, when Prophet Muhammad went to the Kaaba, he was going to take out and destroy all the idols, right? And there was a picture of Mother Mary and Jesus, and he used his hand and he protected it. Sometimes we need to remember there are all these stories of goodwill, of generosity and of love, and we need to dig those out, because outside in the media and with different people, it's always negative stories about each other. All right, and I always try to pick up the good things because they hearten me. And I'm also going to show you the, at the back, there's a poster with the St. Catherine's Monastery. And in there is a charter of protection that Prophet Muhammad wrote to St. Catherine's. All right, and I think that these are things, they are worthy of remembering. Some people say it's not true, or we're going to forget it, but I did go to St. Catherine's, and I bought the book, and in the book it talks about this particular charter where at that particular time he wrote about protection of the Christians and their buildings itself. And there was one. So if you want to gossip, you got to get your facts right, okay? That's for me, okay? All right. So I really thank you. All my friends who now I think leave to me like, oh my God, what's she talking about? Do I know her? This is me. All right, and I'm very grateful for each and every one of you who came, everyone who came to share, to say something. I'm really deeply grateful. You know, you all have helped shape my life, really. You all helped me grow, you know. And I really want to also remember, I think, the late Reverend Yap, because he was very pivotal in a way, because I admired him for what he did, and how he was my model to look at, to never give up. Very feisty will, never ever give up the position of being a peacemaker. The other person I really acknowledged in my book was Palestinian Ibrahim Abu Rabi, who is an American citizen. So we assume that all Palestinians could be violent. Ibrahim went to the United States and had a great influence on building the bridges between Christians and Muslims and Jews. And over time, he's traveled with Christians, Muslims, and Jews all over the Middle East, to Syria, to to Turkey, to Lebanon, to Israel, all right? And it doesn't mean that if you come from a conflicted background that you don't have the spirit of a peacemaker. He was what we might say, all of our students here would be like our godfather. He would welcome us, and in his home, there would be Christians, Muslims, and Jews. Talking, sharing, eating. It's always eating. So eating is a very good thing to do if you can't say it. Okay, so I'm going to end now, but before I end, I'm going to invite Yenny, and she's going to read something and share something, all right? You have the...
When a square meets a circle. I came across a circle. So beautiful it was, all colors and stripes in harmonious song. The circle keeps its nature, belonging to its own, enclosed in its tightness, in a beauty of its own. The square can't enter the circle, no matter how it tries. It listens to their song, but cannot sing alone. There is a warmth and love in the circle, but the square can only see it from afar. The welcome is spoken, yet the square remains alone. How can a square enter the circle? How can it breach the impenetrable wall? It sits outside the circle, alone, rejected, forlorn. Only what lies in the circle can bring the square in. Only if the circle can see the unchained what locks it in. It lies within the links to open up its gate. Only the circle can bring the square in. All of us belong to the circles, which make harmonious song. In each circle lies its own beauty. In each lies its song. But when square come upon us, they look like they don't belong. Yet each square was created to be part of the song. So I have a little gift for Guat from Sumba. It's from the eastern part of Indonesia. It's a woven fabric that is a handmade by a woman that is very living in poverty. So it's two parts. It's like a scarf. Why I gave this? Because in this scarf it's made specifically for the interfaith works, in honor for those who are working in the interfaith. This is a calligraphy. It's not Sumba, particularly symbols, but it's specifically made just for the interfaith works. This is a dove, a symbol of for the Christian. It's like a peace, but the symbol, dove symbol, was a calligraphy for Hablu Salam in Indonesia. I mean, in Arabic, they say it's
Love and peace.
Love and peace. Yes. Thank you. This actually was given to me because of the work that I did so far. But then, since I kind of stepped down from the interfaith works, so I'm giving this, passing down to Guat with the permission from the one that gave me. From the Perwati, it's a theological network for women, theological women network in Indonesia. So this is their work, one of their works, and this is for you, Guat. It's made by women, it's for women who works in the interfaith.
Thank you. We have a few more minutes, so are you okay if we get some comments or questions the audience might want to ask? Okay, yes. Please introduce yourself.
Hi, I know Guat as Mary Rose from my church, but I'm Roshni. I'm a journalist and I teach sometimes at NUS. I actually have two questions. My first question is a literary question on the process that brought you to write the book. Like, where were you and what were some of the challenges when you were writing? Because some authors, they take off to an island in the Maldives and they just write there for 3-4 months. But I wanted to know what was your inspiration when you were writing it. The second question I had was, the gentleman mentioned post-September 11 conflict or perceptions. And I actually covered September 11th in New York. So I'm wondering what is your opinion on addressing some of the stereotypes or the parochial views that people may have had after September 11th.
Thanks, Roshni. I forgot the question. Actually, I came back to Singapore to do my research for my thesis, and then I decided that I would go overseas back to Hartford Seminary to write. I think when you're away from your home, you are more open to looking at things. All right, when you're inside here, you might say, okay, I shouldn't say this and I shouldn't say that and what. But actually, my inspiration was the seminary itself, because the seminary is a place where they started from an evangelical tradition to evangelize to the Muslims, and it transformed itself into a place which dialogues with Muslims. And we have texts and scriptures and art in our basement, that were donated by an Armenian to the seminary itself. And what makes the seminary unique is what my very first visit was that as I drove on the road on Sherman Street where the seminary is located, I immediately saw this ancient looking abbey. And I said, the driver, that's the one, that's the seminary, because seminaries look like that, right? Ancient abbey, cast stones. And he said, no, it's on the left. And there was this huge span of green grass and a white building, stark white, just like that. And this tells you exactly what the seminary is about. It's like, it re-looks at everything. And what is interesting is the seminary has Muslim chaplaincy and Christian chaplaincy. So Christians and Muslim pastors and whatever counselors, they are on the same program, so that when they go to the various universities and colleges, they can connect with each other, can work together on collaborative projects, they do interfaith programs together, and they have an understanding, right, to build. And this is what is happening. Like, I think we have Sohaib Sultan, who is at the Muslim chaplain at Yale. In where?
Princeton.
Yeah, in Princeton University. So they have all that in the university. The second thing is that I think we had a whole host of faculty, and my inspiration, as you would know, would be Ibrahim Abu Rabi. And it's the first time I met a Christian who did a PhD in Islam, and that was Professor Jane Smith, who later on went to Harvard, and then to work in Harvard, and then now she's retired, Harvard University. But she inspired me, a Christian. I've never met a Christian who studied Islam before, and I had these two people, one Palestinian who says like, go, 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 and then Jane was like, I think you should think about it this way, so I had these two groups of people in there. And of course the other person that inspires me is Yahaskel, and Yahaskel is a Jew. And I met Yahaskel when I was in Israel in 2001. And actually, Yahaskel calls himself an interfaith educator, Yahaskel Landau. And the interesting thing at that time when I met Yahaskel, he was married to this lady called Dahlia. And Dahlia's home was actually the home of a Palestinian before. She had come her parents had come from Europe for Aliyah, come back. The invitation for Jews to come back home. And when she was young, she received a visitor. He was a Palestinian. He came and said, can I visit your home? And when she took him around, she realized that he knows a lot about this house, doesn't he? The lemon tree was grown by his father, and he was born in this house. What happened? I thought this was my house. And when she checked, she found out in the mid-60s that there were rumors of wars, there were forced evacuations, there were many, many stories about what happened, but the Palestinians ran off from their homes to find refuge elsewhere in safe places, like Jordan, and after that could not return home. and could not own their homes anymore. And because of this, that Bashir cannot take back his home, even if Dahlia wanted to give him this house. After her parents died, she contacted him. They decided that they would build a non-profit organization called the Open House. And that what it does is, on weekdays they do early childhood education programs, is a center for that. On weekends they do interfaith work. Jewish, Christian, Muslim, getting the children to get to know each other, to challenge all the stereotypes. And that was where I first really met somebody who was involved in interfaith activities, and he was a Jew. But he had studied in Harvard Divinity School. So it was very interesting. I was meeting all these kind of people who had crossed over all over the place. And there was no boundary that they would not cross. And I thought, that's someone I'd like to be. And so that was what inspired me. Okay, so I come. You know, Prof. Farid Alatas is not here, but Imad, his ambassador, is here. So I want to mention that I wrote in the book, post 9/11, Zainuddin invited me to a conversation between Christians, Muslims, and Catholics. With Imam Habib Alatas from the mosque and people from Darul Arqam and various Muslim organizations. And they talked about 9/11, why they think it happened, and there were Christians there too. And Prof. Farid was the one who got everybody together. We did it at the NUS Social Research or NUS Scholars Program in a conference room. And that was what I realized, like, what happened? And I'm like, hey, I never heard of this history before, I didn't know this was happening to the Muslims, and I didn't know what the Americans were doing, and And I think we need more of these kind of conversations to awaken us, because, okay, I loved when I worked. I worked in EDB. So EDB was a place where we would, new ways to make Singapore progress. New technology, high-end investments, manpower, skilled manpower. We were not training the spirit. We were not educating the man or woman. We were creating people to support an industry to help our country grow. I never even heard of the ILO, and I hold a Bachelor of Science of Honors, which means that when I open the papers and when I see the word ILO, I don't see it. I didn't even know ILO existed until 2001 when I was in Israel, and I was like, in Israel they have an ICCI, Inter-Religious Coordinating Council of Israel. Is there one in Singapore? And then when I go back, I'm like, it's the longest inter-religious organization. And the first thing I said was, I never heard of it before. And I told my friend, I never heard of it before. Is it because they didn't publicize? But I'm showing you all the papers, the publications. You can see the first thing, after our independence, the first thing that happened was LKY called, because Utusan Melayu, published something about Christians proselytizing to Muslims. And then he called the bishop, and because it was the Catholics who did it, he called the bishop and he called the Protestant, represent to say, you don't do it, right? So they announced it in the papers that we don't proselytize. But I never heard of this. So we read what we want to read. The history is out there, but we never read the part that we don't like, or the part we think is unimportant, or we shut our ears. And so in my conversation, I always ask people to listen with their heart. Listen with your heart. Listen to the story. Not the facts, the story. What is that feeling? What is the emotion? And reflect again. And that's what I've been doing, reflecting again, because there are so many. The big event of 1949, right, when IRO was established, was a big event. It was at Victoria Memorial Hall, And if you look at the list of the people that were pastors, Reverend, Lutheran, all kinds of denominations, Methodist, and Reverend Armstrong, the bishop of the Methodist Church, was there. And then Maulana Alim Siddiq, all right, the roving ambassador of peace, was the one who asked to begin to think about global peace. And you can see RO's book there. Hey, but sorry, I never heard of it. No. I'm supposed to be the educated person, and I never heard of them. So we select what we want to read and we want to hear. And so I had to go back and look at that and say, oh my gosh, I don't even know this part of my history. Like, I don't know the history of my family. And we have to renegotiate this part. We have to look and see that there were people there. So what about us? At that time, the need was after the World War. Armstrong had been to prison. Had been a prisoner of war. Reverend Yap had this major accident, during the war. They remembered how terrifying war was. It was so terrifying that my family never ever speaks about what happened in the war because they were traumatized. So I think we need to look and understand ourselves and be open.
Thank you. Many of the episodes that Guat mentioned can be found in the book. In fact, her own journey was captured in one part of the book in chapter 6. To know more, you have to buy the book. That's the sales pitch. The book will be is on sale for $30. It's just limited edition. We are not printing many of it. So if you like a copy, please purchase it at the back. If not, please write in to us. There's an order form online that we'll share later. The proceeds from the book will help us to fund further interfaith activities here in Singapore. And thank you, Guat, for your generosity in helping us also in promoting interfaith work through the sales of the book. And hopefully, like what Guat mentioned, she has not heard of IRO and all that. There's no excuse anymore. The book is here. Share about the book with your friends, with your circle of friends, with your families and all that, so that there's no excuse not to know our history. There's no excuse not to know what transpired in the past, and hopefully from the past we can learn a lot of things in order to build the future.
Are these books on sale in a bookstore?
We have not made plans for it to be put on bookstores yet, because we need to discuss with the, there's a certain percentage cut and all that. We need to discuss with the bookstores to work out the sum for that. But meanwhile, it's available through our center. Yeah. Yes. So just write to me, or you can give us a call. Like us on Facebook page, so you will find the order form online also. And please do share about this book with friends, even if they are not purchasing it. At least they know that there is something out there in case they want to find out a little bit more about history and about interfaith relations in Singapore. So the best thing is to mingle over food. That's how we build friendship.
And take a marble, and if you like, the two of you can play marbles, because last time we played marbles. And you can play and then fight over your marbles.
Yeah, and then we often steal each other's marbles.
Yes.
Okay, so thank you for coming. Food is served through the blue door there. Yeah, so you can bring your food here, but please don't spill in this carpeted area, because this place is not ours. So thank you very much for coming, and you can get Guat's signature, you can interact more with friends here. Thank you for coming. Have a very good weekend. Congratulations.